Welcome to the Career Ready Podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all things you need to be career ready with the Career Service Center at College of DuPage. I'm your host, Pierre Michaels, for today's episode. In addition to learning about resources and the job search process, an important part of being career ready is understanding career path. To help us explore the impact of studying the humanities as a career readiness, I have Julia diLiberti with me, who works as a professor of humanities here at College of DuPage. Julia, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Pierre.
So before we get started, can you share a short introduction, or as we like to call it, your elevator pitch?
Well, I'm an educator. I've been teaching since before cell phones, but not since before email. I've been teaching for a while. I was trained in language and literature, which are both humanist fields in the humanities. And most days I sort of believe that in this Greek idea of eudaimonia, which is flourishing. And I think the humanities are the fields in which we learn who we are and how to flourish in a society that is constantly changing around us. So I hope that's not too lofty, but that's my elevator pitch.
All right. Sounds good. And on this podcast, we normally, when we bring faculty in, we're talking about CTE programs or career technical education programs, because we're the Career Ready Podcast and people want to make those direct connections to education and career paths. However, we know that humanities provides a lot of career readiness, but it's not just for one path. So instead, can you share why humanities brings value to many different career fields?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, so I looked at some of the different, I looked at NACE, I looked at Forbes, I looked at the World Economic Forum for, and even Indeed, for skills that workplace people are working for. And there's a lot of overlap in them. And so then I looked at our course objectives in humanities, and there's a lot of overlap. So, I say to my students, for example, no one, depending on the job you're going for, no one is necessarily going to ask you to evaluate and analyze a piece of art, but they are going to ask you to evaluate and analyze. And the piece of art is your training ground, but it's not what you'll be doing. So we're developing a lot of what we call the soft skills. I think they're misnamed. I think so. I don't like to say hard and soft skills. I like to say hard skills, which are hardwired. I like to say hardwired skills, the things you memorize, and then soft skills, which are decision making, discernment, judgment, et cetera. So driving a car, I just want to make sure people understand that when you get in a car and you turn on the key and you use the pedals and stuff, after a while, that is just a hard skill because it's hardwired and you know how to do that. But the decision to stop or blow the stop sign or to go five miles over or to cut in that line to see if you can make it, all those decision-making things, to take the shorter route or the longer route, all that decision-making stuff, those build soft skills. But we do it differently in a humanities class. So a lot of people want they use these terms like leadership and they use terms like critical thinking, and I think they're both overused, misunderstood terms. And I think that we ask people to think about and analyze historical and cultural expressions. We ask people to analyze audience. We ask people to draw conclusions about the human experience. And so I think those point to some leadership skills. I have this whole great list here. The World Economic Forum wants creativity, initiative, and originality. And I think that humanities courses force you to bring original ideas to these things that exist.
Yeah. No, I think that is what I think of when I think of the humanities and the value of it. So you were talking about the soft skills or the hardwired skills, and I think it's important to say the hardwired skills because when we talk about career readiness, hard skills are technical things that are different from what you're talking about. The term that we commonly refer to from a career perspective, though, for these soft skills or the hardwired skills are the transferable skills.
But they're not the same. All skills I think are transferable.
Yes, I would agree in the general sense all skills are transferable, but from the sense that when we're trying to classify them, what kind of skills are you developing? From the humanities perspective, overlapping with how I would talk about it from a career readiness perspective, the transferable skills are those fundamental skill sets that you need in any setting.
Correct. Right. Right. And so, right, in terms of communication, one of our course objectives is effective communication. Right. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to investigate and differentiate and examine. And so, I forgot, and I want to take a step back. And for people who don't know what the humanities are, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be good to. So the humanities are, first of all, it's a bunch of disciplines under this rubric of humanities, and they are the arts, and there are 9 arts: comics, architecture, literature, music, sculpture, etc. And then they are history, culture, religion. They are all places where you have to analyze and where you have to. And so when people talk about critical thinking, you have to talk about different cultures and you have to talk about different practices, and you have to take these disparate pieces of information and synthesize them or analyze them or put them in context. And all of those are the skills that the World Economic Forum talks about: analytical thinking and innovation. I noticed that a lot of people want resilience, and I think that's a post-COVID skill that people are looking for: resilience, showing up, doing the job, being reliable. And I think in some ways any course teaches you that, but I think particularly humanities are more thinking about the skills that get dismissed as leadership and critical thinking. But I think people don't realize what critical thinking means, which means bringing together multiple pieces of information and figure out how they work together or how they don't work together. And I think we will probably continue to disagree on transferable versus hard and soft, because I think
yeah, and I think what we're disagreeing on is the term we're using to define these. But I think conceptually,
yes,
we're thinking of them in the same way. We just classify them in different terminology.
And one of the other things I would say is, like, technology comes up and people want skills with people want employees with technology skills, but that doesn't mean you necessarily want you to build a bridge. They want you to know. I just was reading about front end and back end technology so that you can, what they call it, a block stack. What is it? It's a stack of skills so that you can see a project through from beginning to end, through setting up the technology, through the blogging, through the accounting, through the, And so I think that's a whole different way. And when people say technology, we're not just talking about a pencil or typing. We're talking about a whole set of skills that.
Yeah, normally when I talk about employers desiring technology, I like to present it as us being technology agile, which means we understand different type of technology and how to adapt to the technology and determine what's the correct technology and the correct application of that technology to get the job done, which incorporates a lot of these fundamental skill sets that we're talking about from the humanities.
That's exactly what I was going to say. In that, so our right, exactly. I think that and there's a woman named Kira Amstead who wrote this article about the humanities, saying that people want a definition of humanities, and she said it's not so much what they are, but what they do. And they train the brain, they form the brain, they develop skills, they develop these intellectual muscles in analyzation and in originality and creativity.
What advice would you give to a student who is considering humanities as a major, but they're concerned about it not being defined to a specific career path?
That's a plus. That's a fantastic. I think we tried this in one of my courses where you came in and we just took the course objectives, and those are the skills that students are going to transfer into to a resume, right? I think so. They did this study in 2018, 2021, actually, and it said that over 900,000 people, humanities graduates, are in management positions, and that if we want to talk, I know money comes up too, but that 90% of humanities graduates are satisfied in their lives because they feel that their humanities careers are allowing them to do what they want to do. I know that's not quite the question you asked. The question is that what you want to say to people is, right, I can learn the computer program, but it's not so easy for me to walk in and already know how to do teamwork or to lead a team or to contribute to a team. So I think, again, humanities is this whole package of transferable skills.
Right. So the takeaway, right, is humanities may not have a specific path in mind, but it leads to basically any career path you want to go down.
Yeah, and I think you have to. I hate to use a term, but you have to market yourself that way. You have to point out that. And I do want to say things like the Art Institute paired up with the Police Academy to to have them observe paintings. And so there's this one funny story where this guy is saying, we got a domestic here, but it's really a picture of Lucretia and Titus, and it's a Roman story, et cetera. But the idea was that you can look at a painting and you can say, I think it's this scene. But as you begin to look at the details, it's only in looking at the details and putting them in context that you can actually understand the story of what this painting is about. And so I somehow think that was related to what you said, in that, you just, these are the skills you're developing, and that you're going to take them in. Okay. So I teach students to look at art in art for patterns, but I say, we talk about patterns of behavior, or people look in healthcare for patterns of the spreading of diseases, or patterns of what happens when inoculations go down. So that there's these all kinds of patterns that happen in any field, but I'm teaching you what the elements of a pattern are. You're going to take it out and be able to apply it to anything. So that's why I think humanities – I have a colleague who – I say humanities are the toe-dipping courses that sort of get your feet wet and lead you to the major that you want. And I have another colleague who says, on the contrary, humanities are capstone things that can sort of end your career because they force you to draw from all the different disciplines you've studied and to put them in context.
Yeah, and I think either way you look at it, the important thing is that humanities provides the foundation to the knowledge that you need to be successful. We've hit on this a little bit. I'm going to try to narrow it in a little bit here. But earlier I referred to the CTE, a little acronym I'm trying to catch on for humanities. Is humanities are a KAO. They're the knowledge for all occupations.
Yeah.
Right. CTE is a specific path. This provides, so many different options. As I knew this conversation was coming up, I asked ChatGPT, or maybe it was just a Google search, successful people with humanity degrees. And a lot of CEOs came up.
900,000 managers.
So why do you think CEOs and those managers, those vast number of managers, are career paths for people that studied humanities as opposed to the people that studied the CTE?
Well, I mean, so I don't want what I say about humanities to mean that it doesn't apply to CTE, but you got to read people. So it's one thing to understand the computer program. It's a great thing to be able to understand how to program it. But if I come to you and say, I need a program that's going to do this, this, and this, you have to be able to communicate with me, and I have to be able to communicate with you. So it sets up that kind of communication. So, the difference between learning how to weld or to find a vein, because, there is no career. You're not going to have to communicate or encounter a different culture, as far as I can see, or a different language, maybe even. I will talk about a committee meeting I was at, and there was a debate about whether students should be required to get a C in English before passing to the next grade, and it was a debate on this committee. And everybody was looking to the automotive guy for their side, right? And the automotive colleague said, my students have to deal with customers, and my students have to deal with companies, not just in the United States. I think a C is what students need because all of my students, even in automotive, have to communicate. And so I don't want to harp on communication too much because I do think that you have to be able to walk in and see a big picture too, which I think it taps into those skills of analysis and taps into those skills of bigger picture view, context. What does this group need that this group doesn't need? How do I get those resources? How do I talk to people about getting those resources? So I don't know if I can give you a really why managers can do it. I have a lot of theories on that, but I do think it's because I have another example. This guy, one guy whose name I have forgotten, says you got to Shakespeare and Cézanne. When you learn how to interpret Shakespeare and to read and to interpret a Cézanne painting, you're looking at new and innovative ways to talk about the big ideas. Right? The big idea is people are like, that's a painting. But Cézanne was messing around with time and space in those paintings. Shakespeare has these age-old dilemmas that we're still conquering. And another guy that I love, I have my famous hits of famous people in the humanities, said the reason people didn't understand that the 2008 depression was going to happen is because they forget that money is a fiction. And that when you teach people to read fiction, you teach them to predict the future. But you also make them remember that any system is built on the humans that make it up. And so all the algorithms and all the technology wasn't predicting that the market was going to crash in 2008 because they forgot to take in the unpredictability of human nature. Yeah. And so I love that as an argument for why we should study the humanities.
Yeah. All right. So trying to simplify it a little bit, the technical only takes you so far. It's, all these skill sets, strengths that the humanities is trying to help you develop that you must be applying to advance beyond. Like if you're focused only on the technical, well, then you're going to be limited on how far you can go. But then when you develop these transferable skills, these hardwired skills of communication, all those other things, it lets you move forward into a bigger picture.
I think that's well said. You should have just started out with that, Pierre.
But we're here to interview you, not me.
I mean, even Einstein, Richard Feynman and Albert Einstein, both Nobel Prize winners in physics. And Feynman went, my advice to students would be, whatever side of the brain you're using, use the other side, right? But Feynman went and traded painting lessons for physics lessons, and Einstein played the violin and read philosophy. And I think, those guys are developing both sides of their brain, but those scientists were not devoid of putting the humanities into their work because they felt that they could make better analogies, right? They felt they could make better connections to a larger context.
Yeah, so as students go out and develop, of course, some of this is happening in the classroom, but what kind of experience or opportunities would you recommend people go out and try to take part in to develop these opportunities or these skill sets?
I think, we do a lot of stuff on campus at COD that I think students do take part in and are already doing. I mean, there's student clubs, and when you serve in a student club, you're with a particular community, but often doing outreach. I do, for example, if we think about Prairie Light Review, it's a student-run publication here, and so students are getting those kinds of experiences. So I'd say we have a lot of student clubs, and I think students should go and join a club, one, to find their people, but two, to get experience in having to do teamwork. It comes up on everybody's list of what people want. So if you have to deal with other people who may be like-minded but don't agree with you about a particular way to proceed or a particular event, that is going to be a skill building. I do think people should use both sides of their brains. And I do think there are a lot of opportunities on campus too. I know that the tech people doing this podcast use students from MPTV, for example. That's live experience. You have to go out and see, boy, stuff doesn't just happen. You have to put in the time, you have to show up, and you actually have to learn, and you can't be offended when people know more than you, right? So you have to build your skills. I would say if you need to know more, you should invite us into your organization or your class. We do Humanities Fest here too, and we're kind of all advocating to have some students help us set that up, just because public humanities is, I believe, no democracy functions without the humanities. The humanities tell us how we perceive ourselves at any given moment. And if you want to be part of that dialogue, right, then the best thing you can do is get involved in some of the events on campus, either helping prepare them or attending them.
So for our listeners that aren't at COD or part of COD, there are still other ways to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, every city has a library. Most counties have a historical organization, or there's museums, or there's just other film discussions where you can create your own. I want to have Martin Luther, right, just tapped his 95 Theses on the cathedral door and broke apart the Catholic Church. Really, but he just wanted to have a chat, right? But I mean, you can also create your own moments of conversation. I would, to be honest, too, I would recommend that everyone take a second speech class. The first one's required, but part of and an acting experience at COD, museums are asking people to take acting classes for their docents so they can interact with the public. So anything that teaches you to be more confident and more interactive with the public. And even if that means volunteering somewhere at one of those organizations that's nonprofit, just anything that can put you out in the public eye that allows you to meet the public, to work for and with the public is what my advice would be for those not on campus.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of get these security blankets on, and they don't like to push themselves outside of that comfort zone. Right. But that comfort zone is where you're really getting to grow and develop in these really important abilities that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about the Humanities program here at College of DuPage?
Yeah. We have a variety of classes. We have courses where we try to link to STEM disciplines. We have a course that tries to relate to medical humanities. We've got women in the arts. If people want to look at art and the arts and humanities beyond Europe and the U.S., we've got a course for that. So we have a mythology. We've got all kinds of courses. But every one of those courses has a live interactive component in it. Because it's one thing to look at a PowerPoint of a piece of art. It's a very different thing to go and stand in front of this piece in the art museum and actually see the layers of paint. It's a very different thing. I make my students sometimes go out and do interviews with people outside of class or with specific. One time they had to go sit in courtrooms and things like that. We try to do some interactive piece to get students to realize that, what you're learning in the classroom does have applications, right? We have a Humanities Fest here where we try to relate to all disciplines and bring all disciplines together and have different talks about that. And we try to do that for students.
So you've mentioned the Humanities Fest a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're still in the early stages of planning for the one coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have the dates for that?
Yeah. The 16th and 17th of March, if I'm not mistaken. We have John Waters is coming to the MAC on the 15th, and so we thought we would have that after John Waters came. Anything
else you want to share or promote as it relates to Humanities Fest? Maybe?
Well, it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure. The idea was that in order to allow people to not feel constrained by what they do or don't think humanities is, choose your own adventure, and you tell us how humanities relates to you. You're going to pick your story about what you want to tell about the humanities. And how it relates to your discipline. We try to make it open to every discipline. We also try to incorporate career services in that because we think they're an integral part. We've had really, really good, thanks to your office, we've had really good alumni panels that come back and tell us what jobs they've gotten in the humanities and that tell us how the humanities has helped them in their current jobs. So I think those have been useful and helpful. And on the ground, people that our students can relate to. Yeah.
So part of what you were saying with the Humanities Fest, as far as kind of like choose your own adventure and link it back to the disciplines you're interested in. And then earlier you were talking about you have humanities setting you up for STEM paths and medical paths, right? So to study the humanities and get that foundation links right back to these other more specific paths.
Correct.
It's just a matter of choosing your own venture and making that all play out for you.
Right. That's nice. Nicely done, Pierre.
So we're going to be wrapping up here, but is there anything else you want to recommend to students or young professionals as they prepare for their future?
Don't think about the money. I do think about the money. Money is important. It's not the most important thing necessarily. Like we all want to be able, but studies show that if you pursue what interests you, and what you love, you're more likely to stick to it and be in a career longer than if you pick something because it's what somebody else wanted for you. Or if you thought, well, I'll just do this for the money. Sure, you can make money, but you may end up leaving it or leaving burned out. There is the sad news for a bit is that there is a discrepancy. If you go into the humanities fields, you start out probably about $5,000 lower than non-humanities, but by the end of your career, you have caught up. That gap closes. So if you stay at something long enough, and the idea that if there's more ability to stick to it because it's something you love, then that gap is going to close a little more quickly than if you're miserable at a job and not able to see a future or development in that job for you. And also, they'll just open up your world.
So how can interested listeners find out more about the program here at COD?
We have great faculty, and any of us are willing to meet with anybody anytime. So, we've got Professor Price, Professor Clifford, Professor Fotos, and then me. And we all have different specialties, too, which I like. So Adam does cartooning and is an artist, and Josh is a philosopher in religious studies, and Tim does music, and I did literature. But also, so you can contact any of the faculty. We have a web page. We have pencils, by the way, pencils that tell you exactly what humanities do. They take life from inanities to humanities with just a few changes in perception. And so right now, I would say certainly, come to Humanities Festival, learn more about us, but also probably the best way is to go to our webpage.
And you could find information about that web page and Humanities Fest in our show notes. Well, thank you for this great conversation.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks for having us.
And with today's episode, there is no listener question. However, if you have a question, you can submit it to careerpodcast@cod.edu or on social media at COD Career Center, and you may hear it answered in a future episode. Thanks to all our listeners, and special thanks to Julia for joining the Career Ready podcast. We hope you now have a better understanding of the value studying humanities has to prepare individuals for the workforce.